Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, we're traveling deep into the Appalachian backroads. 10 stories pulled from quiet towns, each with its own secret buried just beneath the soil. These aren't tales of monsters or myths. They're about people, neighbors, friends, strangers, who saw something they shouldn't have, and were never quite the same again. But before we begin, hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell me where you're listening from, because one of these stories might have happened just a few miles from your door. Thank you for being here. Now then, let's begin. I came back to Laurel Fork with the kind of tired I didn't want to talk about. My mother was getting older and needed help around the house, and I thought maybe the fresh air would be good for Sam. He was 14, too old to be thrilled about living with his grandmother, but he didn't argue much. Truth is, he was quieter than usual. The town hadn't changed much since I left. One grocery store, a post office that only opened 3 days a week, and the tracks, still slicing straight through the trees east of town, like they were waiting for something that never showed up. Laurel Gap Tunnel sat right past the tree line, black as a mine shaft, always damp, no matter the season. Sam asked about it the first day we drove in. He said he'd read online that the tunnel hadn't been used since the 80s. I told him that was true. The last train came through in 1984. The tracks were still there, but the line had been dead ever since. That night, just after midnight, he knocked on my door, whispered that he'd heard a whistle. Long, distant, exactly at 12:05. I told him it was probably a dream. That sounds carry weird through the trees. But when he went back to bed and I sat up in the dark, I heard it too. The whistle, clear as day, echoing through the pines. If you're ever in a town where the tracks lead into darkness, and you hear a train whistle just past midnight, ignore it. Pretend you're asleep, because if you stay awake long enough, you'll start to hear more than just the whistle. The next night, Sam said he saw a light inside the tunnel. A flicker of orange, then nothing. I told him it could have been a tourist with a flashlight or maybe someone taking pictures. I didn't want to scare him. Truth is, I didn't believe myself. We walked past the old depot that morning. A sign rusted onto its side still read, Last Train 1984. Sam found a tin box half buried in the gravel nearby. Inside was a train ticket, yellowed, stamped, his name written in pen across the top, with today's date below it. I told him someone was playing a prank. Maybe a kid in town who knew we were new. But that night, just after 12, I woke to the same whistle, closer this time. Sam sat up in bed, said nothing at first, just looked at me. Then he whispered, "Mom, it's getting closer." Is set. I turned on the porch light and looked out across the yard toward the tracks. There was nothing there. No train, no lantern, just the shape of someone standing on the rail, arms at their sides, not moving. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. By the third night, I'd had enough. Sam and I took flashlights and his old video camera and headed for the tunnel just before midnight. The air was colder near the trees. The tracks felt more solid than they should have under our feet. The tunnel's mouth was open halfway, like someone had pushed the gate wide recently. The whistle came again, this time from inside, deep and low, like it was moving away but slow. Then we saw it. A blur of orange light passed fast across the far end of the tunnel. Too quick for headlights, too high for a flashlight. And then the sound. Footsteps, fast, running toward us on the gravel. I raised my flashlight and aimed it into the tunnel. There was nothing there, just the empty tracks. But between us, resting on one of the rails, it was another train ticket. Fresh, clean, still curling slightly from being dropped. I picked it up. It had Sam's name on it. I didn't tell him right away, just slipped the ticket into my coat pocket and said we were heading back. Sam didn't argue, but he walked close behind me the whole way, the flashlight low to the ground, like he expected something to grab his feet. I kept listening for the whistle, but the air had gone still. When we got home, I tried to call the sheriff's office, but there was no signal anywhere near the tunnel or the back road leading to it. Not even enough bars to load a weather app. We stayed at my mother's that night. I told Sam we would pack up in the morning and leave town for a while. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of something rolling. Not loud, just steady, like pressure on metal and old wood. I stepped into the hallway and saw Sam already standing at the window, pale in the moonlight. He said the sound was coming from the tracks. I looked too, from the upstairs window. We had a view straight through the trees. The rails had long since been broken apart on that side. Overgrown, useless. But the noise was there. Wheels over steel. Rhythmic, like a train rolling right through empty air. I held Sam's hand and said, "We'll run if we have to." "They staying." He nodded, didn't say a word. The next morning, I made coffee with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Sam barely touched his cereal. Then my phone buzzed once. A new alert I hadn't set. Departure scheduled, 05 a.m. I clicked it. The link opened to nothing. Just a blank screen. No station listed. No service provider shown. We agreed to leave that night. No more waiting. No goodbyes. Just get in the car and go. At breakfast, Sam found another ticket on the kitchen table. This one was folded neatly in half. When I opened it, I saw both our names, Harriet and Sam. Seat 7. Date, today. I threw it in the trash without showing him. He still saw, but he didn't ask any questions. We left just after sunset. The drive out of town felt longer than it should have. I watched the rearview mirror more than the road. Sam sat silently beside me, one hand gripping the armrest. Then, as we crossed the old railway junction on the south end of town, the headlights caught something. Behind us, off the shoulder, a long, dark shape, partly veiled in mist. Black steel, windowless cars trailing into fog. No light, no sound, but it moved like a train. I raised my phone and snapped a photo. Looked at the screen. The picture showed empty tracks. Sam didn't look at me when he spoke. Just said, soft and steady, "That was seat 7. Well, then the car rocked gently, like something had passed by too close. Like the pressure of a wind that wasn't there. We didn't stop until we reached the next county. Even then, I kept the engine running for a long while. We made it to a new town and found a rental. Quiet neighborhood. No tracks nearby. I thought we were clear. But Sam changed. He stopped sleeping through the night. Set his alarm for 05 every evening. It never rang. He just opened his eyes when it lit up. I sold the car. Couldn't stand driving over rail crossings anymore. Too many times the dashboard lights flickered right as the tires hit the metal. Sam kept the last ticket. I found it by his bedside table, tucked under his pillow. It still said seat 7. I asked him once why he looked at it every night. He smiled a little. Didn't answer. You think you're just doing honest work. Patch a roof. Send the invoice. Move on. But then you find a well behind the house sealed with concrete and wrapped in rusted chain. And suddenly, you are not sure who really owns the place. I had taken the job off an app. Client listed as anonymous. Payment through a verified wallet. Address pinned to a small house behind what used to be Martin's General Store in Elkhorn City. The key was supposed to be in a lockbox under the porch. It was... No one met me when I arrived. The store looked shuttered. Windows dusted over, but not quite empty. I caught someone watching me from inside. An older man. Stiff posture. Eyes like flint. He didn't wave. Just closed the blinds slow. The roof was easy enough from the outside. Rust along the flashing. A patch of shingles already pulled up. Like someone had started the job, but never finished. That's not uncommon when folks run out of money or patience. Behind the house, the The yard sloped down to a stone well. It was old, older than the house, maybe even older than the store. The lid was concrete, fitted snug over the opening, with a rusted chain looped twice and padlocked tight. The sides were mossy and cold to the touch. I wasn't supposed to mess with it. Not part of the job. But the chain looked newer than the stones, like someone had reinforced it recently. That first night I stayed in a cheap motel off the highway. Around midnight, I heard a soft tapping at the window. I got up and pulled the curtain back, but there was no one there. Just the buzz of the soda machine outside and the lights humming above the lot. The next day, back on the roof, I noticed the underlayment looked disturbed. Not torn, just shifted, as if someone had stepped between the beams and moved carefully. I started wondering if kids had been climbing up at night. Around noon, a man walked up the drive. Gray beard, plaid coat. He didn't introduce himself, just stared up at me and said, "If that well starts to smell, don't call the cops. Call Martin." Then he turned and walked straight back into the woods. That got under my skin. Later, I crouched beside the well and knocked once on the lid. The echo that came back wasn't hollow exactly, more like packed soil. And something else, something damp. That evening, I checked the vent stacks near the chimney. One had a small black lens fixed inside, not a real camera, just a dummy with wires clipped short. No power line, no transmitter. It was meant to be seen. That night, I didn't sleep much. I told myself I'd finish the job quick and never come back. But something about the air behind that store felt wrong. Like the town had grown up around a secret no one remembered how to bury. So I came back after hours. Flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. I told myself I was just filming for a buddy who liked weird backwoods stories. That's all. I scraped away a patch of moss from the well's edge. And there it was. A dark brown stain along the rim. Dried. Cracked. In the shape of a handprint. I heard gravel crunch behind me. Turned around slow. A figure stood just beyond the porch light. Watching. His voice came low and steady. "Did you open the well yet?" "They, broppers this not back in." I shook my head. Lied through my teeth. He didn't blink. Just stepped aside. And from the far end of the drive, another light clicked on. Someone else stood at the back door, waiting. I backed away from the well, trying not to show how bad my hands were shaking. The man near the porch didn't move, just stood there like part of the siding. I turned toward the driveway, kept my steps slow. Then I ran, straight through the side yard, into the tree line where the ground dipped. I heard footsteps behind me, more than one pair. Then the low hum of a truck engine turning over in the dark. Headlights stayed off. The tires kicked gravel hard. They were using the old service road that looped behind the store. I could hear it closing in, chewing up the dirt in quick bursts. I slipped on the slope, caught a root with one hand, tore skin off my palm, but kept going. There was a culvert under the next ridge. I ducked into it and crouched low. The truck rolled past just seconds later. Black silhouette. No markings. One of the men leaned out and scanned the trees with a flashlight, but never aimed low enough to see me. I waited until the sound faded. Then I crawled up the bank, covered in mud and sweat, and ran like hell for the highway. My legs didn't care which direction. I just knew I had to find another human being. I hit the main road and flagged the first car I saw. A silver SUV, braked hard. Couple from Michigan inside, visiting the mountains. They saw the blood on my arms, the panic in my face, and let me in without asking. I didn't look back until we were 5 miles out. Even then, when we passed a pull-off near a ridge, the truck was there again. Parked. No lights. Just someone inside. Sitting. Watching. I filed a report with the local police when we got into town. Gave the address. Gave the name Martin. The officer typed it into the system and squinted. He said there hadn't been a Martin listed in Elkhorn City in over a decade. Not since 2012. No permits. No property under that name. I showed them the photo I took of the well. The officer turned the phone sideways, tapped the screen. "There's nothing in this picture," he said. "Just a patch of wall. This is not now, but I saw it. I know what I saw. The curved stone rim, the chained concrete lid, the smear like something had clawed at the inside before it was sealed. I quit contracting work not long after. Now I only take jobs where the homeowner meets me in person, where I can see the property records and shake a living hand. But sometimes, on back roads, I pass an old store or a boarded-up shop, and I always check behind it, not for a sign, for a slope in the dirt, for a space where a well might have been, just to make sure it's still shut." Before we step into the next story, if you're still here, still listening, with the lights low, maybe drop a comment. Just tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. All right, let's keep going. I never believed in anything beyond what you could hold in your hands. No ghosts. No fates. No otherworldly pull whispering through bloodlines. But I used to believe I knew who I was, until I saw that door 3 times. And each time it felt like it was waiting on me to remember something I'd spent my whole life trying to forget. My name's Callan Bell. I was 29 when I came to Dungannon, a town I had only ever heard about once. In the line of a will, my great-grandmother, Agnes Bell, had passed. I'd never met her, didn't know she was still alive until the lawyer called. The plan was simple. Stay a week, settle the paperwork, pack what was left in the house, and move on. She had lived in a cottage just a block off Main, 2 turns from the church. I stayed there alone, sorting through brittle photos and drawers that smelled like cedar and years. On the 3rd night, I took a walk. The air was cold but clean, and I followed a narrow alley that curved behind the old church. That's where I saw it. A blue-painted door, flat against a crumbling brick wall. No knob, no hinges, no trim. Just there. It was the kind of blue you only see in memory. Washed out. Familiar. I stared at it longer than I should have, expecting something to click. Nothing did. When I went back the next morning, the wall was blank. Same bricks. No paint. No sign anything had ever been there. I tried not to think about it. But 2 nights later, I took a different path home and saw the same door again. This time on the back of an abandoned frame house near the old pharmacy. Same shape. Same color. Same feeling in my chest, like I had walked into a conversation that paused just for me. I told the pastor about it the next day, just offhand, trying to laugh. But his face changed. Not like I scared him, but like he remembered something he had been trying to forget too. He said, "That door used to be the entrance to the sanatorium, back when the Bell River Institute still stood. But the whole building collapsed in a storm almost 20 years ago. And at speed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I looked through the cedar chest in the spare room. Underneath a stack of handmade linens, I found a portfolio of old chalk drawings. All soft smears and pale strokes. Mostly people without faces. One of them showed a man standing in front of a blue door. No features. Just shape. Standing still, like he was waiting to be let back in. The next thing I remember, it's dark outside. I was standing in front of the church again, and the blue door was there, right where I had first seen it. Only this time, there was writing on it. Faint, like finger-traced dust. Callan Bell. Returned. I turned away. That's when I heard it. A slow scrape, like nails dragging gently across wood. Then a voice. Rough. Close. No one opens it a 4th time. Izzy Markshules. I ran. Didn't wait to see if the door moved or if someone stepped out. The alley was darker than it had been. My lungs burned by the time I reached the edge of the cottage yard. Back inside, I locked the doors and went straight to the bedroom. Every drawing I had found, I tore into pieces and shoved into the fireplace. The flames caught slow, like the paper didn't want to burn, but I stayed until all of it was ash. I tried to leave town the next morning, called the lawyer, said I was done, but there was a delay on the property transfer. The clerk said something about old land boundaries needing clarification. I didn't ask more. I just hung up and stared out the window. That was when I saw the door again. It stood against the side of the neighbor's shed. Same color, same flat, frameless fit. I could barely breathe. I didn't go near it. Just closed the blinds and told myself I was imagining things. But the next day, it was behind the library. And after that, along the outer wall of the diner. People walked past like it wasn't there. I stopped sleeping full nights, started keeping the lights on in the hallway and pacing from room to room, just to see if it might show up inside. It never did. And then one afternoon, it disappeared. For the first time in days, I felt clear. I called a driver to take me to the nearest station. Anywhere but here. While we loaded my bags, the man looked at me sideways. "You Agnes Bell's kin?" he asked. I said yes, then added, "I just came in last week." That day we're content. He didn't respond, just shut the trunk and got in. We drove through the edge of town, past the church, past the pharmacy. I didn't look out the window. I didn't want to know. But at the last stoplight before the highway, I caught something in the rear view. The blue door, wedged into the chain-link fence behind the cemetery. Only this time, it was open a crack. I turned around fast. Nothing. Just the fence. Just the trees. But my phone, still open on my lap, had snapped a photo by accident. In the picture, the door stood wide, and inside that darkness, just barely visible, was someone. Same posture, same build, wearing the same coat I had on, same face. Me. I left anyway. I didn't speak the whole ride. Weeks passed. I moved again, found a new job, but the door never really left. I dream now in shades of blue. Every night begins with the sound of gentle scratching on wood. I avoid mirrors, not out of fear, out of doubt. Because sometimes, even when I know I'm alone, I'll glance at the wall across from my bed, and for just a moment, I'll see the outline of a rectangle. Soft, familiar, growing brighter. I hadn't planned on going back to Keystone. None of us had. But after Mom passed, we found a storage box in the attic marked only with a name and a shaft number. Bell. D. Mine 13. Riley said it was a sign that we were supposed to go. She was always like that. My younger sister, but never the cautious one. She wanted answers about Dad. I just wanted closure, even if it meant confirming what we already assumed, that he never made it out of that mountain. So we packed up the car and made a weekend of it. Riley's boyfriend Joel tagged along, half excited, half nervous. We hired a local guide through an old trail site, a guy named Owen who'd grown up there and still lived in a cabin near the old Ridge Road. Owen met us with a thermos of coffee and a warning. Said some parts of the mountain weren't meant for visitors, especially not Shaft 13. He led us through overgrown brush and steep switchbacks, further from town than I expected. At the bottom of a narrow slope, hidden behind a screen of black pine, we saw it. A rust-streaked steel plate bolted into the hillside, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Painted faintly across the top, almost gone with age, was a faded number. Owen stopped short. Wouldn't come closer than 10 feet. Said the shaft had been sealed permanently in 1989. Not for collapse, but by choice. Riley stepped forward, hand on the cold steel. "This is where Dad worked." "I know it." 8. Owen didn't answer. That night at the cabin, she said she dreamed of knocking. 3 knocks. even, deliberate, from inside the door. The next day, we convinced Owen to take us back. He didn't want to. Said there were things underground that echoed different, things that remembered. The door was thicker than I expected. No handle, just a rusted ring in the center. I leaned in close and saw scratches circling it. Deep grooves, like something had twisted it from inside. Joel pointed to a vent on the upper left side. A pipe, maybe 8 inches wide, connected to nothing. He put his ear to it, just joking at first. Then he froze. Turned the lock. It was a whisper, faint but unmistakable. Joel jerked back. We told ourselves it was the wind, the pipe acting like an acoustic trick. But the words hadn't echoed right. They'd carried forward, toward us. That night, Riley pulled out something we hadn't seen before. A folded sheet tucked into the lining of Dad's old gear bag. It was a diagram, hand-drawn, labeled Shaft 13 Manual Seal. At the center, a ring marked in red. The caption beside it said, "Lock opens from center." Index 2. We sat there, quiet, staring at the page. And if someone local ever tells you not to stand too close to a steel door in the woods, don't ask why. Because if you stand there long enough, you'll hear something on the other side start to listen. Riley woke me before sunrise. Said she couldn't sleep. Said she needed to try the lock. I should have said no. I should have stopped her. Instead, we hiked back with the diagram in hand, flashlights in our pockets. The air around the shaft was colder than the day before. Still, no wind, like even the forest was holding its breath. She stepped up to the door and pressed her palm to the ring in the center. It moved under her hand, not easily, but with weight, like something reluctant but not rusted. She turned it. A low groan echoed from deep below. Then the ground trembled under our boots. Just once, like a warning. Owen shouted from behind us, voice tight with panic. "Back up. Now, that's not a real door." They said. The metal plate hissed at the seams. Steam or dust or something hotter. Then, with a soft mechanical hiss, the slab shifted. Not inward, outward. A split formed at the edges. Air pushed through. Burnt. Sour. Like wet stone mixed with oil. From inside the dark, something breathed. Not a gust. Not a breeze. A breath. Deep. Measured. Wet. Joel stepped forward before I could stop him. A piece of his jacket caught on the frame and vanished into the dark. He jerked back, but not fast enough. Riley screamed. I grabbed Joel's arm and pulled. He stumbled, and we both fell hard against the dirt. Owen lit his flashlight and pointed it into the shaft. There was a man in there, standing just beyond the light, motionless, dressed in old mining gear, helmet gone, face half hidden in shadow. I reached for Riley. She backed up, eyes locked on the figure. I pulled everyone away as the door began to slide shut behind us. Soundless and slow. No one touched it. Just before it sealed, I looked back. Another figure had appeared behind the first. Taller. Still, but neither of them cast a shadow. We ran. Down the trail. Through the trees. Our breaths sharp and uneven. Joel limped. Riley kept looking over her shoulder. Owen didn't speak. He just led every step like it cost him something. We didn't stop until the ridgeline broke and the town lights came into view. Later, in the motel, Joel wouldn't sleep, said every time he closed his eyes. He heard that breathing again. Riley burned the diagram in a metal bin behind the building. I tried uploading the photo I took of the door to back it all up. The file vanished mid-transfer. My laptop crashed and never turned back on. At 1:13 a.m., my backup drive purged itself. No error. No log. Just blank. The next morning, I checked Dad's old notebook. The last page. One I swear had been blank before, now held a single line, written in a shaky, fading hand. I was the one who shut it, but I didn't shut it fast enough. We moved into the apartment above the furniture store because it was cheap. That was really all there was to it. Lana and I had just gotten married and we were looking for somewhere temporary while we figured out jobs in the area. The lease was month to month, and the landlord didn't ask many questions. The building was old, 3 stories, with a warped staircase and a constant smell of varnish from below. But the unit itself was fine, clean enough. High ceilings, and one strange feature that made it feel almost charming at first. A massive round window in the living room, shaped like the face of a clock. The hands were painted into the glass, old black lines that never moved. They pointed to 4:46 and never shifted, no matter the hour. I joked about it the first week, said it was nice to always be early. Lana smiled a little, but not the way she used to. By the second week, she had gotten quiet. Not distant exactly, just distracted. Her eyes kept drifting to the window. Anytime I asked what was wrong, she would say, "You don't remember. We talked about this yesterday." Except we hadn't. I started to feel like I was missing parts of our conversations. Like I had skipped scenes in a play and everyone else had the script but me. I told myself it was the move, the stress, the noise from the shop downstairs that never really stopped. I thought it was fatigue. That's all. A passing fog. But there was something cold in that apartment. Something quiet, like we had stepped inside a tape loop and every day was waiting to repeat itself whether we noticed or not. I used to believe I understood the rhythm of a shared life, that love could steady any strange place. But I was wrong, because some places do not adapt to people. They wait until you adapt to them. It started with my sleep. I would wake up in the dark, not sure why, always at the same time. I'd glance at the clock on the nightstand, and it would read something like 3:12 or 4:1. But when I walked into the living room and looked at that window, it always said the same thing, 4:46. One night I saw a shape behind the glass. Just for a second, a still silhouette, blurred but familiar. I thought it was Lana. She was just standing there. When I asked her the next morning, she said she hadn't gone near the window since the first night. Said the shape of it made her dizzy. That was when I started tracking the sunlight. I wrote down the angle and brightness of every ray that came through the window at different hours. But it never changed. The light through the clock window stayed exactly the same. Mid-morning glow. Always. Lana grew more withdrawn. Her answers got shorter. Sometimes she wouldn't answer at all. Then one afternoon, she looked me in the eye and said, "You need to stop asking the same questions. We already talked about this." But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. One day she said she needed some air. Said she was going to walk once around the square. I watched her go. Then I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. I went downstairs and checked the sidewalks. Walked the whole square twice. Asked the guy working the register at the corner store if he had seen her. He just shook his head and said no one had come through all morning. I went back upstairs and stood in front of the clock window. The light coming through was soft and yellow, exactly the same as it had been the first morning we moved in. I stared at the painted hands, still locked at 4:46. That was when I noticed something in the glass. A faint reflection that did not move when I did. It looked like Lana. She was facing inward, her face turned slightly toward me, but not smiling, not blinking, just watching. I reached out and touched the pane. It was cold, much colder than the room. I checked the cameras outside the building, the ones installed above the storefront. The owner let me scroll through the last few hours. The footage showed Lana stepping out of the front door, walking to the sidewalk, stopping at the window just below our apartment. And then she stood still for 23 minutes. Then she was just gone. No walking away. No cut in the footage. Just there one frame, and gone the next. I paused the screen, watched again. She had been looking up toward the window, the same one I was watching from now, and the reflection in the glass still had not moved. I called her name. No answer. I pounded the sill. Still nothing. I stepped outside, climbed the fire escape, and tried to look in from the roof above. But from the outside, there was no clock window, just a blank wall, a flat stretch of brick where the window should have been. I called the police, told them my wife had disappeared. They asked for the rental paperwork. When I pulled it up, the lease only listed one name. Mine. No Lana. No mention of a second tenant, even though I remembered signing for both of us. The woman at the front desk looked up and said, "You moved in alone. That's what's on file." I left the apartment that night. Couldn't stay there. Not alone. A friend helped me find a hotel. I told myself I was confused, that it was shock, grief, a break in the mind, not the world. I nearly believed that, until the front desk clerk handed me a small padded envelope, said it had been left for me earlier that day. Inside was a faded photo. It showed me and Lana, standing close together, both looking straight at the camera. The photo was taken from inside the apartment, through the clock window. Only neither of us remembered it being taken. That one hit a little different. If these stories mean something to you, leave a like, subscribe, or share this video with someone who'd stay up to hear it too. And if you've got a true horror story of your own, my email's in the description. Now, story 6. If someone told you not to cross a red-marked stake in the woods, and you saw no reason to fear it, then you've already become exactly what he's waiting for. I learned that the hard way. My name's Jesse. I was 39 when I drove the truck up into the forest near Chilhowie, Virginia, with nothing but a bow, a few packs, and a cabin rented for the season. After the divorce, I thought hunting would reset me, give me something raw and alive to face. The cabin sat on the edge of a hunting property that backed nearly into the state line. The ad claimed undeveloped acreage just beyond the tree ridge, but the map looked patchy. Some land privately owned. Some land part of the state game reserve. Borders contested more than once. I heard from locals. When I arrived, I unpacked under a sunset that raked through the pines and turned everything gold and fringe. On my first morning, I slipped out at dawn. My boots moved soft in the damp needles. I had permission for the property marked in the lease, but I didn't worry when I passed the old wooden stake painted red at the side of the trail. The stake leaned slightly, and no sign warned me to stop. I jogged past chasing deer tracks, feeling the cold air fill my lungs. Then I heard the stretch snap behind me. I turned. Nothing. Just trees still. But the air changed. Heavier. Quiet in the wrong way. At cabin that evening, I found a soaked raccoon hide staked to the front porch. I'd never shot anything. I didn't trap either. But the hide dangled, dripping in the moonlight. There was no message with it. Just the sight of someone passing through that border and making it mark. The next day, I walked the boundary again, checking the pegs, but not seeing the red stake. I set a trap where I thought deer would follow. When I returned a few hours later, the trap was empty. Wires pulled loose. No sign of my prey. Near an oak, I found letters carved into the bark. Back off. The message, simple and final. By dusk, I felt exposed. I sat on the porch, sipping coffee and looking toward the ridge. The red stake loomed from the shadow line of trees, angled more than the first day. I didn't walk near it again. Instead, I kept the cabin lit, gun by my side, wondering how many times someone walked that line before I ever saw a track. When the rain came, it stayed overnight and into dawn. I packed up my gear with the plan to leave early. I thought I'd push out at first light and drive home. I flicked off the porch light and climbed into bed, but I never felt safe sleep come. At midnight, I woke to a single shot ringing out somewhere down the ridge. A sharp crack. I froze. I thought I heard steps in the forest beyond my window. I didn't answer. I stayed flat and silent. That shot changed the forest for me. It made the red stake not just a marker but a warning. I realized in that moment I was not just an outsider wandering. I was the intruder. The trail had forced me past the line and someone saw. Someone decided I crossed. And they would enforce it. The next morning I flung the lease and my maps into the burn barrel behind the cabin. I dug up the hide as well, buried it deep in the soil, away from that porch. I left as soon as I could. I never looked back until the truck hit pavement. Even now, when I drive through mountain roads, I watch for stakes. Red paint. Leaning wood. I check the tree bark for scratch marks. I carry a photo from my trail cam of the red stake, scratched deeper now and more tilted than before. In my wallet, I keep a folded note scribbled in my own blood when I reach the hospital after the shoulder wound. There is no accident, only trespass. I hit the dirt road before dawn, gear packed, and the lease signed to a property that suddenly felt like the wrong decision. My shoulder still ached from the old soccer injury, so I moved slow, scanning the tree line for signs that the red stake had changed again. The rain had left the trail slick, boots sliding over leaf mounds. So I kept my eyes lower, looking for disturbed needles or fresh footprints. For a moment I thought I heard laughter, light and carried by wind. Then gone. Then came the bullet. It whistled past my ear and thumped into a tree behind me with a hollow crack that shook my sense of safety. My heart slammed as I dove for cover, scraping my palms on mossy bark. I waited until it was dead silent, and then I ran. Branches whipping my face, adrenaline burning my legs. The truck's red taillights were distant, and I didn't dare turn back. From a hollowed stump, I grabbed a sturdy branching stick, knuckles white, breathing harsh. The man, or men, had pursued, flashing lights, engine revs echoing from a service road I thought was disused. I thought he would wait to shoot again, but instead he stepped out under the trees. Silent, rifle in hand. I raised the stick like a bizarre shield. We faced each other for minutes that felt like hours. He said nothing. I heard the sucking of rain off leaves and my own blood pounding in my ears. I took a step back, but his aim slipped down then up in a fluid motion. My mind screamed run, but my body held fast. Then I swung. The stick connected with metal. Hard. A clang that rang through the woods. He cursed and stumbled into the mud. I didn't stick around. I sprinted until I hit the highway and flagged a passing truck. The driver stopped without a word, and I climbed into the cab, door slamming, engine growling away from the woods. Months later, I still flinch at every twig break. My shoulder never fully healed, and I have nightmares of the stake buried in moss. Its red paint dripping in moonlight. I now treat property maps like sacred texts, tracing lines until I memorize every angle. In my wallet, I carry the trail cam photo of the red stake. The note I wrote in the hospital remains folded there too. There is no accident, only trespass. Every time I'm out on new land, I watch for a marker. Not just a stake, but the person behind it. Because some borders are meant to be guarded. And some trespassers don't just get lost. They get claimed. I arrived in Pulaski on a gray morning, suitcase in hand, and a contract for the Census Bureau tucked under my arm. The town seemed smaller than the map suggested. Houses clustered tight, shuttered wooden frames leaning toward each other like tired neighbors. I was 31 and eager for work, accepting the role of updating population records. My first assignment, the old house used decades ago by the Bureau when they did door-to-door counts, now abandoned and out of use. Each morning I walked across Main Street from the motel, past the boarded-up storefronts and the storefronts that still displayed prints of the New River Valley. I entered the census house through a side door cracked and warped. The lock rusted. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and floorboards that creaked under every step. On a table sat the logbook, leather-bound, thick, with decades of names and years next to them. I opened the book to a new page and started typing the names and counts from microfilm into my laptop. On the second day, I looked at the old entry I had just scanned, and noticed a name from the household I had visited. The previous afternoon was gone. I rubbed my eyes and flipped back several pages. The row was blank where it had belonged. I asked the lady at the address if she realized her name had disappeared from the system. She looked at me and simply said, "That room hasn't had anyone live there since the fire." Is backed. The fire. A house down the road burnt in the 60s. Pages of smoke-scarred census sheets had been stored at the house. I sighed and ignored the chill that crept up my spine. I told myself this was just an administrative error. But later that night, I sat alone in the house. The logbook open, lamp low, and I noticed the page that contained my own name. It was blank where I expected Milo, next to date of entry. I leaned closer and saw a different handwriting in darker ink. Confirmed 2023. My heart sank. I closed the book, shut off the lamp, walked to the window. Outside, the town was quiet. No cars passed after 9. The shuttered street lamps cast long, pale pools of light. I thought about leaving the next morning, but I stayed. I told myself it was just nerves, that I was tired from moving and living alone for the first time. The next day I tried again. I recorded names, houses, ages. At midday, I returned to the logbook and found 4 new entries above the line I was working on. Names I didn't recognize. Addresses I had not visited. I flipped the pages back, but the entries were already there. Pulaski Townhouse 7. Census House Annex. Residential Unit 11. I closed the book and stood up, telling myself that the job was still routine. Nothing unusual. In the small hours, I heard a tap on the door at the house. Just one. I checked the time on my phone. 2:13 a.m. I stayed put and listened. The tap came again. Softer. Then scuffing steps across the creaking floor. I held my breath until the sound faded. Then I opened the logbook again and found at the top of the current page my name, Milo, written in the spidery ink of someone else. Below it, entry closed. My stomach clenched with regret. I recalled then something I should have done differently. I should have questioned when the name changed in the list. I should have noticed when the living persons turned into blanks. Regret settled in. I closed the logbook and left it on the table. I walked to the window and looked out at the empty street. The lamp outside flickered, then went off. Silence swallowed the house. That night, I slept in the logbook's room. The pages spread on the blanket beneath my arms. Dreams came in names and erased faces. I woke to find a sheet laid across the cover of the book, with my address handwritten. I stared at it and realized I was no longer sure of the man I had been when I arrived, and I couldn't remember whether I'd ever moved out. I called the bureau the next morning. The woman on the line asked for my employee number, then put me on hold. When she came back, her tone was polite but strange. She said no one named Milo had been employed in my district for at least 6 months. I checked my email for the contract, but the attachment was gone. The messages I sent to my supervisor bounced back with a delivery error. Even my ID card looked off. The photograph was mine, but the name beneath it had changed. I walked to the motel to ask about my room. The clerk looked confused. She said she did not remember renting to anyone by that name. The key in my pocket had the right tag number, but when I tried it, the door did not fit. Inside, the bed was made and a stranger's luggage sat at the foot. I went back to the census house. The door was already open, swaying slightly as if it had been waiting for me. The logbook sat in the same place. Pages turned in a faint draft. I opened it and found new entries written in darker ink, neater handwriting than before. At the bottom of the list, just above the spine, was my own name again, followed by the word pending. I tore the page free and stuffed it into my coat pocket. I stepped outside and decided to leave on foot. The bus stop was 10 blocks west of town, and I walked with my eyes down, avoiding the windows of the dark houses. When I reached the highway, a pickup truck pulled over beside me. The driver rolled down his window. He was an old man with pale eyes. "Heading out?" he asked. I nodded and said yes. "Anywhere but here." He looked me over for a long second and said, "You should confirm first. If you don't, you'll keep coming back. Thanks for watching. They 80. I forced a laugh, thanked him, and climbed in. The seat smelled of oil and old paper. The ride was quiet except for the hum of tires on asphalt. After a while, I noticed the road signs repeating, as if we had been driving in a loop. The man said nothing. He only turned the wheel one last time and pulled to a stop in front of the census house. I felt my chest tighten. The same curtains fluttered in the window. The front door stood open wider now. Inside, the air was warm. A lamp burned on the desk. In the chair sat someone facing the wall. I moved closer. My pulse thudded so loud it filled the room. The man turned around. He was me. Younger, cleaner, smiling like we had been expecting each other. He said softly, "You entered my name in the census 3 years ago. Now it's my turn to confirm yours." That was not dark. I stumbled back, knocking into the desk. The logbook fell open, its pages blank, except for the newest line at the bottom. My name. Confirmed. I ran through the front hall, past the rooms that now looked endless. Each door I opened led to the same corridor, the same light, the same sound of paper turning somewhere close by. The house stretched in all directions, folding back on itself. When I finally burst outside, the morning sky was pale and cold. I looked down at the page I had torn from the book. It was blank now. My name was gone. Later, when I checked the Bureau database, Pulaski no longer showed a population count, just a gray box where the number should have been. A search for my name brought up one record, a field agent missing since 2023. The attached photograph was not me. But on my phone, in the photo gallery, there was one image I had never taken. A wooden desk, a thick logbook, a nameplate reading Milo, confirmed, is then with Cress. I came to Pipestem on a freelance assignment, just another gig in a long list of small-town projects. My editor pitched it as a rustic photo series, Appalachian industry, then and now. I stayed at a cheap inn near the river and spent the first 2 days shooting faded signs, boarded-up windows, and rust-eaten bridges. Nothing out of the ordinary, until I followed the sound of turning wood just past dusk. The old mill sat low near the gorge, its frame swallowed in vines, but the shape unmistakable. A water wheel rose beside it, cracked in some places, warped in others. I paused when I saw it turning. Slowly, methodically. There was no water. The river had been redirected decades ago, and the feed channel that once powered the wheel lay dry and overgrown. At first, I told myself it was the wind. Maybe it had been balanced just right to catch some hidden current of air. But the way it moved, the rhythm of it, reminded me of something deliberate, like breath through the nose of someone sleeping too lightly. I met Ben the next morning. He was the kind of local who walked like he belonged to the ground he stood on. Thick boots, soft voice, hard eyes. He worked with the town's preservation group and had keys to most of the historical buildings, including the mill. When I mentioned the wheel turning, he only nodded. "Still does," he said. "It always does. Don't ask why unless you want to hear the answer. That's a bien-tated day." He offered to show me inside. The wood groaned under our steps as we moved through the lower level, past broken crates and old belts that once ran machinery. The wheel outside turned just slow enough to creak, just loud enough to never fully stop. Ben gestured toward a faded sign near the far wall. It read, "Keep it turning." They used to oil that wheel even when the plant was shut down, he said. Said it was easier than dealing with what happened when it stopped. In either case, that night, I set up a time-lapse camera. I left it facing the wheel and went back to the inn. Something about the air around that place stuck to my skin. I had trouble sleeping. I kept imagining the camera catching the wheel slow down, then stop, then maybe start again without any push. The next morning, I found the camera right where I left it, but the memory card was gone. Not yanked out or broken, just missing. Only 2 images remained in internal storage. The first was a blurred shot of the wheel. The second was darker, taken at some unknown hour, and it showed a figure standing just behind the camera's reflection in the window. I showed it to Ben. He didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he asked if I wanted to see the old sluice path. The water channel, he explained, was closed off years ago after the pipe burst beneath the mill. No flow, no spin, but the wheel still turns. I said. Ben nodded once. We hiked down to the back of the structure, where a rusted metal plate had been bolted over a section of the pipe. When we peeled it back, a thin stream of water sprayed out. Not much, just enough to slick the stone and hiss through the break. Enough to make something move if you wanted it badly enough. Ben crouched and watched it for a while. I think we'll regret it if we stop this, he said. His voice was quiet, almost reverent, like he was talking to the air itself. We left the pipe open but decided to step back from the site for the day. I tried to convince myself it was all a fluke, an old mechanical holdover that just needed a little gravity and water to stay alive. But that night, I backed up the remaining photos and scrolled through them slowly. One image stood out. In one of the time-lapse frames, the wheel had stopped for exactly 5 seconds before starting again. No wind, no shift in light, just a pause, and then motion. Ben saw it and whispered, "They were watching. They see with that cly." I laughed it off. Told him, maybe the camera just glitched. But the way he looked at me, I stopped mid-sentence. The next morning, we returned to the mill, and for the first time, the wheel was completely still. The quiet around it made the whole building feel heavier, like it had been holding something in its breath and finally let go. Ben flipped the old circuit breaker inside. The wheel gave a slow groan, then began to turn again. As it did, a set of dusty overhead lights flickered to life in the lower level. One of them pointed straight at a patch of stone wall. As the light hit it, faint letters began to show through. "They feed the mill." I took a step back. Ben reached out to touch the stone, but I grabbed his arm. "Let's go," I said. He stared at the wheel, his expression distant. "I think they want more now." There was knowing. Before I could argue, I caught my reflection in the glass of a broken cabinet. It was not just us. Behind us stood a group of blurred figures, half visible, faces darkened, but eyes burning with a faint red glow. I grabbed my camera and ran. We did not speak the rest of the day. Ben dropped me back at the inn and said he needed time to think. I knew then that he was not going to leave that place. I also knew I would not go back to check. Weeks later, I heard Ben had gone missing. His truck was found near the gorge. Front bumper pressed against the same metal pipe we had opened. No footprints led away from the car. No sign he had ever stepped out. I stopped taking assignments after that. Even now, I cannot hear the sound of a fan or a rotating motor without checking to see if it is just wind or if something older is turning. I keep one photograph from that trip, the only one left on the drive. It is the water wheel, turning slowly. No one in the frame, but every time I look, I count the shadows in the windows behind it. And lately, I think the number is changing. I'm really glad you've stayed with me this far. Before we move on to the next story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss any of our new videos every single day. Now then, let's continue. You thought you could flee the city and breathe again in a small town, live quietly in a one-bedroom place, and vanish for a while. I believe that too. My name is Dina, and I was 31 when I rented the tiny flat in Pennington Gap, Virginia. After a breakup, I wanted quiet, fresh air, and rooms without echoes of someone else's life. The apartment was part of a 3-unit row near the old railroad line. Near enough, you heard trains in the night, but far from noise. The unit across from mine belonged to an elderly woman named Marla. She chatted in the hallway, brought me cookies the first week, smiled when our paths crossed. On her window, a white board hung, handwritten with markers. The first message I saw read, "Good morning, Dina," and I laughed because it felt friendly. Harmless. Over the next days, the sign kept changing. "Hungry yet?" it asked one afternoon when I was back from the store. I thought it was a joke, a way for Marla to make me feel at home. Then a note appeared that chilled me. "Don't work too late." I remembered exactly the night before I'd fallen asleep, with my laptop still open at 11 p.m. I tried to brush it off, told myself I was imagining connection where there was none. But the board changed again the next morning when I came back from coffee. Bad dream last night. I froze because I had woken shaking. No memory of the dream, but taste of fear in my mouth. I didn't mention anything to Marla. She just smiled and said she didn't remember writing it. A week later, I came home early from the supermarket. I walked past her window and saw the new message. "Nice dress. Blue fits you." I was wearing a blue dress. My pulse caught in my throat. I knocked on the apartment door and asked if Marla had written that. She said, "I suppose maybe I did." Her eyes weren't friendly then. They were flat, distant. That night, I taped brown paper over Marla's window. I thought maybe that would stop it. The next morning, I peeled back the paper, and the board sat blank. Relief hit me. I felt safe again. I told a friend I was moving out next month. I thought I could leave the board and the notes behind. But then I noticed my computer's webcam had turned on at midnight, though there was no log. The light blinked faintly, and when I opened the image capture folder, blank. I shut down the laptop and locked the door. For a moment, I felt the calm I thought I'd bought. Then the board changed again. Why move? We're safe here. I came home from work and saw those words. The friendly script lurked in the window. The air in the hallway felt thicker, heavier, and I realized I did not feel safe. I closed my curtains, turned off lights except a lamp in the corner. I didn't sleep again that night. I got an email next morning. From my own account. Subject, "You dropped this." Inside was a photo of my pillow, flipped upside down from how I sleep. I stared at the screenshot until my vision blurred. I wanted to believe someone was playing a harmless prank. But something in me changed. I packed the next day. A motel room, bags in the trunk, and I left Pennington Gap before sunrise. I told myself it was over. For a month, I heard nothing. No messages. No changes. No windows lit with marker. I felt free. But one morning I woke in the new place and glanced at the building across the street. Someone's window had a small white board. The phrase crisp and sharp, "See you soon." I held my breath. I knew the message was mine. I didn't answer. I pretended I didn't see. And for the first time, I wondered if leaving really mattered. After the breakup, I wanted to disappear for a while. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet reset. So I took a short-term rental in Pennington Gap, Virginia, a town small enough to be forgettable, with trains that still passed in the night and neighbors who smiled more out of habit than interest. The apartment was one of 3 identical one-bedroom units lined up beside a gravel path. Old, but clean. The neighbor directly across from mine was an older woman named Marla. She had soft white hair, always wore a blue cardigan, and greeted me every morning with a wave. What stood out most, though, was her window, taped behind the glass. Just beside the curtain was a little whiteboard, cheap plastic, the kind kids use for spelling games. On my second morning there, it read, "Good morning, Dina," in rounded dine, confident handwriting. I smiled back instinctively, even though I had never told her my name. Maybe the rental company had mentioned it. Maybe she was just friendly. It felt harmless at first. Over the next few days, the sign kept changing. Sometimes it said, "Hungry yet?" or "Nice weather today." Always friendly. Always just vague enough to be normal. Then came the first message that caught me off guard. "Don't work too late. His Wante." I blinked at it for a moment, thinking maybe it was coincidence. But the night before, I had stayed up well past midnight with my laptop open on the bed. The light had been on until at least 1 a.m. Something about that message, its timing, its confidence, sent a chill under my skin. I told myself she must have seen the light under the blinds. But the next morning, it got worse. The board read, "Bad dream last night." My mouth went dry, because I woke up at 3 a.m., sweating and out of breath, with no memory of the dream itself, only a cold, clinging fear. I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't made a sound. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was all coincidence, small-town oddity, but I started noticing more. The sign changed even when I left early or came back late. One time I walked back from the market at 8 a.m., and the board already said, "Nice dress. Blue fits you." I was wearing a blue sundress I hadn't worn since moving in. That evening, I taped paper over my own windows. Nothing fancy, just brown craft paper I'd used for packing. The next time Marla saw me outside, she smiled and said, "You didn't need to do that. I'm not watching." He had her men. That night, I checked my laptop. The webcam light had blinked sometime around midnight. No saved file. No program open. I went cold. I shut the lid and left it unplugged. The next morning, I didn't check the sign. I didn't look out the window at all. I called the property manager and asked if I could break the lease. He said we could sort something out. No problem. For a moment I thought that was it. Then I saw the board again, clear as ever. Why move? We're safe here. That was when I stopped pretending it was nothing. I locked the doors, pulled the blinds tight, sat on the floor for an hour with the lights off, heart thudding. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. And that was when it really began. You drive back into a small town believing in loyalty and old friendships, only to realize the real danger might be someone else remembering you too well, even when no one remembers someone they once knew. I was 30 when I returned to Bakersville, a town I spent one summer in with my friend Cameron. He had since dated Lacey, whom I barely knew until that afternoon when I arrived. The inn was near the edge of town, just off the quiet square where the bulletin board stood. The board sat on the side of a weathered wooden kiosk near the post office. It listed names in neat typewriter font, under the heading, "Residents, Class of 2008. Cameron and I walked up together, reading names we recognized. I scanned each line. Then I noticed one space, torn away, gaping, the name missing, though the sticky backing remained. Cameron nudged me and said, "That was Jonas's spot." I focused on the blank and asked, "Jonas, who?" He swallowed, and his smile vanished. "Lauren's ex. My friend's ex. The one who disappeared senior year." The board didn't need to name him. The missing line said everything. Lacey joined us at that moment. She glanced at the board and narrowed her eyes at the blank slot. "Never knew a Jonas in my class," she said quietly. Cameron's face tightened. He said nothing. The three of us walked down the street in awkward silence. I tried joking about food to lighten it. No one laughed. Inside the inn, old floorboards creaked under our boots. We entered the room, and I looked at the window. Town square visible out front. Street lights low. Shutters closed. Cameron unpacked quietly. I felt out of place, even though I had called him a friend. The next morning, I asked around at the diner whether anyone remembered a Jonas Heller. Waitress paused. Spoon over the bowl of soup. She shook her head and muttered, "No one ever lived under that name that I recall." We wanted to in major. That afternoon, the bulletin board outside changed. I crossed the square on my way to buy coffee and saw glue and fading letters. The slot where Jonas's name had been now held a small handwritten paper. Jonas Heller, 6/9. But the print looked new. I raised my camera and took a photo. Cameron asked why I considered everything suspicious lately. I shrugged and said nothing. Inside, I felt the weight of unseen eyes. That night, we drove out to the abandoned house once rented by Jonas's family. The windows boarded. The lawn, uncut since I remembered. We entered the back porch where the door hung open. On the floor were deep scratch marks, gouges across the planks, as if someone had dragged themselves out. I crouched and found a smashed picture frame with glass scattered. Inside it, a school photo with names below each face. At the bottom left corner was a slashed-out name tag where Jonas Heller should have been. Cameron looked at me, voice tight. He vanished after someone dragged him that night. I turned away. Didn't want to know what that meant. The inn's lights were off by the time we returned. I lay awake, listening to the quiet, but the missing name stayed in my mind. I realized that some mysteries aren't about what appears. They're about what the town makes vanish. The next morning, Cameron woke me early. He stood at the window, pale, pointing toward the town square. The bulletin board had changed again. Every name was there now, except Lacey's. We ran down together, still in half-buttoned shirts, cold air burning our lungs. Where her name had been, the paper was ripped jaggedly away, edges damp as if from fingers. I called her phone. No answer. The woman from the diner passed us, carrying bread, and when I asked if she had seen Lacey, she frowned and said, "Who?" "They exactly, inside the inn." The front desk clerk looked puzzled when I asked for the key to our room. He said only one guest had checked in under my name. The door to the adjoining room was open. Inside, nothing of hers remained. Even her suitcase was gone. Cameron whispered that this was exactly what happened before Jonas disappeared. We searched until dusk, behind the inn, down the same road that led toward the house we had broken into. The windows there were still sealed, but something had changed. A single pane upstairs glowed faintly, like someone had lit a lamp inside. The front door creaked when we touched it. I could smell dust, old wood, and something damp like wet paper. In the bedroom, the air was colder. There was a new sheet of glass over the picture frame on the floor. And this time, the photo showed our class again. Only now Jonas's name had returned, handwritten in black marker. And, next to his face, another had been added. Lacey Heller. Cameron stumbled back. His voice cracked as he said, "It's happening again." Before I could speak, something fogged the glass of the window. Words began to form, faint but growing darker with each breath. Now it's her turn. I grabbed a chair and smashed the glass. Wind howled through the room. For a split second, I swear I saw Lacey's reflection. Eyes open, hand pressed against the inside of the pane. Then it was gone. We ran out of that house. Branches tore at our arms as we pushed into the trees behind the property. I didn't stop until the lights of Bakersville were only a dim smear behind us. When I finally turned, the town looked too quiet, too still, as if it had never moved at all. Cameron and I drove through the night without speaking. He stared out the window like he was watching something no one else could see. By morning, he said he was done talking about it, and he kept that promise. Months later, I passed through another small town for work. I stopped for coffee near a library and noticed a familiar wooden board nailed to the wall outside. At the top, written neatly, was a name I had not said aloud since that night, Jonas Heller. Below it, a smaller line had been added in careful print. He was here. She is next. I stood staring until the barista called my name twice. When I turned back, the board was empty again, smooth, as if it had never held any paper at all. But when I checked the photo on my phone, the name was still there. And underneath, my own name had just begun to appear. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I truly mean that. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss the next ones. And once again, thank you for walking this dark road with me tonight.